I'm Tommy, and you are on the Love Boat. Glad you're here. The Aldriches, I am glad that you are here. Good to see you. Hey, Taylor, this show, folks. Hey, Krista, Melinda, Denisha, how are you? Hey, there's Taylor. Glad you're here. This show is going to be a little bit different. Hi, honey. Glad you're here. This is one of those critical thinking shows. But we're going to talk about some stuff, and we're going to talk about why people are so bent out of shape about the issue of immigration. Barbara Wade, good to see you. The Bohemian Luciferian Witch. Hello, how are you? Brock Bandy, there you are. We currently are experiencing an awful lot of problems in our country that can be directly traced to ICE, right? Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There's a lot of people protesting the ever-loving hell out of ICE. And one of the reasons is because statistics, and as most of you know, 70% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Hello, Lisa Trimble, good to see you. Nat, how are you? These statistics are telling people some stuff that on paper sure as hell look true. But critical thinking is really something that is essential for this. And I'm a junkie. I was for 30 years of my life. I'm a recovered junkie these days. I don't use. But I have a different perspective on this. And it doesn't require any statistics. But I'll give you some. Here's why people are pissed. Approximately 80 to 90% of fentanyl smuggled across the U.S.-Mexican border at ports of entry is done by U.S. citizens, not immigrants or non-citizens. Fentanyl trafficking offenses make up 86% of all fentanyl are U.S. citizens, with roughly 20% of the offenders identified as white, non-Hispanic. This is a statistic that gets put out a lot. And they say the people coming across the border are not the drug problem. This has nothing to do with the drug problem. That looks that way on paper. I mean, it really does. But here's what it comes down to. Relatable Reese, good to see you. Ashley G, Kevin Hawthorne, Lakeland, Florida. Glad that you're here. Reese, I hope you're enjoying your vacation. From what I understand, you're taking time off, and you should probably do that more often. I think everybody should. But I hope you're enjoying yourself. First of all, ports of entry is something worth talking about, because the coyotes that bring people across the border don't go through ports of entry, right? You don't need a coyote if you're going through a port of entry. You need a coyote to get you across a border and into a state that doesn't have a border crossing. A lot of times this will happen in places in Arizona where they're cruising across fields. These are the horror stories of girls being gang raped and people being handed off from the cartels, where they then have to get to the United States side of the border and work at massage parlors or brothels to pay off the amount of money that it took to get them to the United States, where they dream of a better life. One of the problems with these statistics are they don't take into account the real world. Renee B, good to see you. And this is a real freaking issue. If all of this stuff is being done by Mexicans, right, then how is it that all of these statistics say that it's only white people driving across the border? Now, little critical thinking goes a long way here. I was a junkie for a very long time, and I worked as a public speaker for most of it, right? By the end of it, I was a thief. Once I got kicked out of public speaking, I became a hardcore thief, stealing everything, all the way up to banks. I looked very clean cut for the vast majority of the time that I was on this drug, right? I looked like a guy that should be wearing a suit or maybe a police uniform. I didn't look like the average image you get in your head of a needle-using junkie. For that reason, they offered me this job about 1,000 times. They would say, how would you like to drive a truck across the border? You can keep the truck. We'll give you a 5 or 6 month supply of your drug of choice, which was heroin at the time. And we'll give you 20 grand. Brand new truck, $20,000. Like, this sounded pretty good. But the truth of the matter is, they're not going to put an illegal in a vehicle and drive them across the border. The cartels use American citizens who are addicted to drugs. They don't meet those people in Mexico. These are people who illegally cross our border, start selling dope, and then they find people that look the part that they can use, hey, scroll that zipper, that they can use to smuggle this stuff across the border. Is this making sense? Because people say to me all the time, you don't understand, it's all white people. It's all junkies who got strung out by cells that came from a town called Jalisco in Mexico. If you go to Puerto Vallarta, there is a mountain range right behind Puerto Vallarta. The most dangerous road you've ever seen in your life goes around this mountain. They're cutting a hole through the middle of it. They're putting a tunnel through so that you can get that drug superhighway moving a little faster. But I went down there. I went down there with guys who were dealers. I went down there to test crops. No lie. These guys don't do dope. They find it absolutely reprehensible. In fact, they hate everybody that does it. They have no respect for any of the junkies because all they do is try to get over on them. I mean, we need this stuff to be able to get out of bed. This isn't about getting high. It's about trying to stay, to keep the sickness out. Malia, they call it. So they would say, hey, you want to come down? I'll fly you down there. I just want you to try 5 or 6 different types of heroin. Tell me which one's the best, and we're going to buy that crop. And I did it probably 4 seasons in a row. And that's not 4 years because there are multiple grow seasons in a year. One stronger than the other, but I would go down and test the dope and get paid to do it. They didn't, doesn't make me a drug smuggler, right? Doesn't make me part of this cartel. And the people that are bringing this stuff across the border are doing it for the cartels. So these statistics don't show the story. And this is very common with everything that's going on in our country. The statistics don't add up. And the reason for that is how you rate them really changes things. I'm glad you're enjoying your break. Yeah, I think that that's a good thing. I don't know how long that break is, but you should take a longer one. Unplugging is a beautiful thing. One of the other jobs I had, I'm 6'2", right? I used to run around 240 pounds on average, and I look somewhat menacing if I don't have a hat on, right? This looks like convict camouflage. And they would pay me to get into a car, usually with the wife of the guy that I bought dope with, or the girlfriend of the guy that I bought dope with. And we would drive from one check cashing place to another for about a 4-hour period of time. And my job was to make sure that nobody got into that car because they were riding around with a duffel bag full of cash. And they would go to these places and wire $3,000 to Mexico, and then go to the next place and wire $3,000 to Mexico, and then go to the next place and wire $3,000 to Mexico. If you don't understand economics, wrap your dome around this one. They're bringing a product across the border and they're selling it to enslaved people. Then what they're doing, Karen, good to see you from New Jersey. Love the state of New Jersey, by the way. No, I did not ever have a Democrat judge on any of my cases, primarily because I like to live in cities that aren't overrun with crime. So more often than not, I didn't live in Democrat cities. And if that bums you out, take a look at the United States today, right? Right now, we have got issues going on in Portland. They're fighting ICE. They are fighting the deportation of people who are criminals. And if you go, well, they're not all criminals, Tommy. Bullshit, right? BS. I went to another country. You know what my first action was? To tell that country I was there. To tell that country, this country, that I want to live here. And to start filling out the paperwork necessary to emigrate to this part of the world. Correct, Barbara Waite. It's not a $3,000 limit, but it is a reporting limit. You nailed it. What happens is if they go too high on the money, then they've got to start giving all kinds of paperwork. If they were to keep under the 3,000 mark, you can send it without ID and instead leave a test question. So they would leave a question like, who's your boss, right? And that person answers that, they can walk away with the money. Now, that $3,000 in Mexico is worth a whole lot more money. I don't blame the people who are coming across the border illegally to try to make a life for themselves and send money back to their people. I don't blame them for this. I don't. However, I don't blame people that rob banks because they try to live a better life. But if you rob a bank, you go to prison for it. You come across the border, you don't. So the statistic that you hear, 86% of people convicted for fentanyl trafficking are white. Well, that's because a lot of the people that get convicted or get arrested for this get deported. There isn't a conviction. Now, if it's the third time they come across the border and they get caught with some stuff, then they're not just going to deport them. Now you say, oh, that's not true. Let me tell you how I know that's true. I would call what they call cells. I would pick up the phone. I would dial the dope man. The dope man is just a guy that answers the phone all day long. And he says to you, what are you looking for? You say, I want 15 bags of black, 2 bags of white, whatever you're ordering. And he says to you, okay, go to the Denny's on 5th Street. He'll be there in 10 minutes. He's not going to be there in 10 minutes. It's going to take an hour, hour and a half, however long he wants. They'll go and eat lunch because they know you're not going to leave. You have to have it. Murph, good to see you. Hello, Tony. So you're not going to leave. They know you're not going to leave. But they just, all their job is to tell you what part of town to go to. They're not driving you the dope. They've got 3 cars out on average, 3 different drivers who are going around the city just making deliveries all day long. This became like Pizza Hut. You never had to go to somebody's house or go to a part of town. You just made a call. Now, this is covered beautifully in a book called Dreamland by Sam Quinones. In fact, he got it so right, it's terrifying. It really is. He nailed this. If you've never read the book, you should. Isis Aflame, good to see you. This is really a problem. The statistics don't ever make sense. When I was doing the lifeboat, not the love boat, and all I talked about was drugs, I would say to people, there's 107,000 deaths. 2022, I believe, was the record year. 107,000 and change. Almost 108,000 people died of drug overdoses. If you want to put that in perspective, that's more than we lost in Vietnam, right? These are a lot of deaths. We're losing a lot of people. And this was the #1 cause of death in our country. That's an issue, right? And I talked about this all the time. And I said, those statistics are BS. I promise you they are. They're not even close. At the end of the fiscal year, any of those deaths that are under investigation don't get reported. So let's say and they say on average, it's probably, and these are their numbers, right? These aren't mine. They say on average, we're probably 20% off. So it was really 120,000 and some change. And I don't believe that either. How many junkies die at 70 and they just go, I'm not doing an autopsy on this guy. He lives in the street. We found him dead. We're not going to pay to do an autopsy on him. We don't even know who his family is. So he gets put into the cooler and we don't know what killed him. Now, more importantly, let's talk about nitazines. We didn't start testing for this stuff until just recently. So if you overdosed on nitazines, which is a really strong opioid, in fact, 40 times stronger on average than fentanyl. So this is the nastiest stuff that money can buy. It also costs pennies on the dollar. The ingredients in this stuff come from stuff like antacids. This is the easiest substance in the world to make. It's easier to make than meth. It's easier to make than anything else that people are manufacturing. And I was telling people that nitazines were around a long time ago. Now we're realizing how much it's around and we're testing for it. But those statistics didn't take any of that into account. If a guy died on nitazines, they didn't even test for that. Give you a perfect example. George Floyd. They talk about how much he has in his system when he died. And somebody just recently wrote to me and said, he didn't have all that much in his system. Here was the nanograms per parts per million, blah, blah, blah. They didn't test him for what's called 6-MAM or monoacetylmorphine. That's heroin. And people will say, of course they tested him. No, they didn't. What they tested him for was morphine, because in order to take heroin, which is diacetylmorphine, and process it out of your body removes part of that substance and turns it into morphine, which we can process much easier out, right? So if they didn't test for 6-MAM, he could have done a shot of heroin before he showed up there. They didn't test for it. They didn't test for nitazines. And if you ask AI, they'll say nitazines weren't around then. BS, they weren't. I promise you. I was in prison before that guy died doing time with people that were selling nitazines. ISO or Fido, they call it on the streets. Now, almost everything out there has got it in it. We lost the first lifeboater to an overdose of nits, as a lot of people have nicknamed it, about 1.5 years ago. He died on the combination of nits and a very strong benzo, right, that you don't usually give to people, that you just give to animals, called xylazine. They call this drug trank. Now, if you ask anybody on the street what trank is, they'll say fentanyl and xylazine. But why would you make fentanyl if it costs, say, $4,000 a kilo to make? If you could make nits 40 times stronger for $300 a kilo to make. I promise you they're not sending fentanyl across the border at the rate they used to. But statistics hide all of this stuff. And critical thinking is harder because unless you happen to be in the trade, unless this happens to be something that you lived through, how are you going to know this is BS? But I know it's BS because when I start doing the research and I start reading these statistics, it doesn't take into account that absolutely it's going to be a white guy. If you were a cartel member, would you send an illegal through a border crossing? Somebody that isn't a U.S. citizen going through a border crossing into the U.S. is going to be harassed at a level that a white man is not. But they want you to believe that these are white guys going, let's get rich. And that ain't what's happening. I mean, they may be driving something across the border that has a street value of $4 billion, but they're going to get 20 grand for doing it. And here's where it gets insidious. I met so many people that got busted coming across the border. And I would say to them, how do you get busted? And the guy would say, well, I got busted with 2 kilos. I thought I was carrying so much more than that. See, what they do is if there's a really big load coming through, they send a junkie, a white junkie. Take it easy, Johnny. They send a white junkie across the border. And they call the cops and say, there's a Z71 pickup coming through right now, and that guy's carrying. He put it in the spare tire. It's coming right now. So when that guy comes across the border, they peel him off. 2 dope dogs go over there. They start tearing the car. And then the next truck that goes through has got the load. They also have people driving that are called bumpers. And what that is if a cop comes up and starts doing stuff, they will create an accident, a car wreck that the cop has to deal with. They won't run into the cop. They will run into each other. This is a very organized machine. The other thing that they like to tell you is that all of the dope that comes into this country comes through the ports of entry. They can document this because every bust happens at the port of entry. Please put a 2 in the chat if you realize how stupid that sentence is. Please, critical thinking. All of the dope coming through is coming through ports of entry. We know this because this is where we catch the dope coming through. If you're not catching it somewhere else, that doesn't mean it's not coming across that way. Why would you send someone across the border without giving them a backpack full of fentanyl? For real, you're paying pennies for a pill. You can go across the border and sell it for a hell of a lot more than that. Why wouldn't you have them carry a backpack? The answer is they do. Do you know how I know this? Because I used to buy dope from people that brought it across the border that way. And they weren't bringing across 2 tons. They were bringing 8 to 9 pounds of heroin, right? 8 to 9 pounds. Now they're on their feet. Their family will buy that before they go across the border at $1 to $2 a gram. When they get to the United States, the markup on that could be as high as $80 a gram, $60 a gram, depending on what city they go to. And when the book that Sam Quinones wrote about how this cell system works, how it started, where all these guys come from, and they all come from one region of Mexico primarily. But when he wrote this book, the state that I lived in, the state of Vermont, had 1 heroin bust ever. Now it is the fastest growing opioid epidemic in America. Vermont is one of them. This is a place that had been untouched by any of this. The crack epidemic went right by them because it's a very teeny spot, which means it's not a supply and demand issue. There weren't a ton of people in Vermont going, hey, I need some heroin. They send a cell up there. And the first thing they do, talk about insidious, put a 3 in the chat if this makes you sick. The first thing they do is drive to the methadone clinics. And they get there about 15 minutes before they open because the people that show up 15 minutes before the methadone clinic opens are sick. They're not feeling good. Malia, they're dope sick. And they need that methadone. So instead of that, the guy says to him, here's 10 bags and here's my phone number. That's money well spent. Give a junkie 10 bags of dope, trust and believe they're going to call you back. And I know this because they did it to me. They pulled up at a methadone clinic and I had been doing great. I had 1.5 years on methadone. And I had to use all of the money in my bank account to make payroll because the company that I worked for didn't send the money that they owed us. So I literally pawned my watches. I did everything I could to make payroll so I didn't lose my entire staff because we did phone room stuff. You don't pay them, they're gone. So I got to the methadone clinic this close to them closing. And I said, hey, I don't have the $50 right now for the week. I said, I can give it to you tomorrow morning. And I put on a watch that they didn't take in pawn. It was a Rolex, but they wanted to give me so little for it. And the woman said, sorry, you're going to have to go on financial detox. I said, I've been paying you every day, right, for 1.5 years. You can't give me until tomorrow morning? She said, no, we'll give you 30 milligrams. Well, my dose was 180. I said, you're going to give me 30 milligrams? She said, yeah. I go, I'll leave you my watch, right? This thing's worth $8,000. You can hold on to it until tomorrow. She goes, I can't do that. I said, I drive a Porsche 911. I can come up with with $50 by tomorrow. She said, no. And as I was driving off, yelling mother effer at the top of my lungs and beating on my steering wheel, a guy pulled up next to me and went and opened his mouth and it was full of balloons. And when I pulled over, he came over and he said to me, you need some? I said, I don't have money. He handed me a handful of them and a business card. And I never went back to that clinic. I just started doing heroin again. It's insidious. They're really good at what they do. This entire issue is terrifying. What's worse is how ignorant we, the general public, know about it. Well, that's the truth. And that's because they don't want you to know about it. There is a narrative that is being pushed. And it is the reason that there are people all across the country screaming that Portland's not under siege. They're not. Ask women in wheelchairs that are afraid to leave their house if Portland is under siege. I spoke in every city in America. When I started doing research on this, I used a bunch of different sources. And then I go back at the end of everything I do, I ask the AI models because I want to see what they're pushing. And the AI model said, no, there's no crime coming across the border from illegals. There isn't. This is an American problem. Those people are just looking for a place to work. That's fine. I just wanted to know what they were saying. And they said, and cities are not, absolutely inundated with heroin. This is very unique or opioids at this point, fentanyl. It's unique to certain parts of the country. I was a public speaker. Every time I hit a city and ran out of dope, I had to go out and find a connection to sell me something. And it was never a problem, but it was never easier than it was in Portland or Seattle. Never easier. I mean, you wanted to find dope. It was the easiest place in America to find dope. The reason that that city is under siege is because the people that run that city hate our president so much. I don't like him either. But they hate him so much that they're willing to let their city burn to the ground to make a point. Well, that's fine and dandy unless you happen to live behind the ICE facility or you happen to live a couple of miles from it and you got to drive through this shit show to get home with your kids. Does this make me a hater? Well, then I'm a hater. Illinois, we sent national troops to Illinois and people are pulling their hair out. What kind of president would send troops into his own country? You have about a 100 times greater chance of getting shot in Illinois than you do in some place like Afghanistan or Iraq. It is one of the most violent places in the world. And if you've been around for a while, well, the south side of Chicago is the baddest part of town, and it still is. He sang that song in the 70s. It hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse. Kids die. 6-year-olds get killed in drive-by shootings, and this is a daily occurrence. You can give a government 20 years to fix something. If they don't, maybe the feds have to come in. Like, this isn't insane. It really isn't. What's insane is that it took this long to do it. And what's more insane is we now have a population that thinks, a lot of them, thinks this is an issue. We should never put U.S. troops on the ground. We've done it for millennia. Since we became a country, we do this, right? After Katrina, what did we do? We sent in the National Guard. Why? Because the citizens of New Orleans weren't safe. Nobody pissed and moaned. They said, thank God they're sending in the troops to keep people from getting raped and robbed and looted. Thank God, right? But if you do it to a Democrat-run state, you get a completely different narrative. I watched a video of the governor of Oregon and the mayor of Portland walking through the city to show how peaceful it was. They stopped by a statue that was absolutely beautiful and stood in front of it. 6 hours later, it was completely covered in graffiti with a guy passed out at the foot of it. These are photo ops, and the rest of the world buys it because they don't take any time to do any critical thinking. How is it that you could have protests from July to October without anybody getting arrested? CNN did reports on Antifa 6 years ago and had to acknowledge this is a terrorist organization. The organization itself has one handbook. There's one guy that wrote a handbook for Antifa. And one of the things that they say is free speech shouldn't be allowed, which, by the way, is fascist. It's like one of the most solid tenets of fascism. But since 90% of the asshats watching the news don't know what fascism is, by the way, Antifa didn't get created in the United States. It was an organization that fought fascism. Now it's not. Now it's an organization that fights free speech if they don't agree with it. And it says in there that you have to escalate. If the free speech, this is in their handbook, if the free speech is hate speech, then you have a right to attack these people and hurt them. Put a 2 in the chat if that scares you. Pepperhead says, I live in New Orleans, been putting up with Democrats BS for decades. You know, it's funny that you say that. It's not funny, ha-ha, but it's funny. I was talking to a person on the telephone today from the United States of America. A friend I've had a very, very long time. New Orleans is my favorite city in America. I've said this a million times. It's not where I'm from, but I absolutely adore New Orleans. And the reason that I do is the feeling there among the people is very much like the feeling here. Everybody's kind to one another. It really, now Mardi Gras and things like that get a little bit different, but it really is a very kind and loving city. And last night I heard that there were 3 shootings on Bourbon Street. Bourbon Street's not a place where shootings take place. I mean, there are wards around there that are fairly violent. And if you take a cab in the wrong direction, you're going to get to one quickly. But Bourbon Street was always kind of an oasis. Yeah, you know, sometimes it gets a little raw, but no one's getting killed, right? Now we're getting to a point where it's they don't like our president because they're prejudiced against orange people or vicious comb-overs. I mean, let's keep it honest, man. That comb-over is absolutely ridiculous. If I didn't leave the United States, I would have moved to New Orleans. I loved it. Always loved New Orleans. But we have gotten to a place now where if you speak out against somebody that thinks, come on now. If I do a show and I say what's going on in Portland is a siege, I will get death threats. And you know what? I'm not going to lie. And I'm not going to not stand up for what's right. There are people out there that are 60 and 70 that have lived in what used to be the gem of that part of the world. That city was amazing. Now they live in a place where they're afraid to go shopping. Guess what? Someone has to step in. You don't like the current administration? I got an idea. Send your cops down there. This isn't fake news. I went and found audio of police being called by the feds saying, we need more troops down here, right? It's getting out of control here. They're not going. You're on your own, right? We don't think this is a problem. Defecating in the streets, setting stuff on fire, not allowing people to talk. And do you know why they say you can't send them in? Because they're exercising their free speech. Their free speech is stopping other people's free speech. That's not how it works. And for you people that don't get this, the only thing that you are protected in the First Amendment from is not being arrested for the stuff that you say. You can still get punched in the face by somebody that disagrees with you. There's no way to stop that. You can also get fired by your boss if he thinks that what you just did embarrassed his company, right? All these people that are saying what Jimmy Kimmel did, Jimmy Kimmel isn't on cable. He's over the airways. The taxpayers actually subsidize that. He had to get a license from the government to do that and go put out misinformation. Johnny Carson didn't do that. In a famous interview, somebody said, we don't even know who you vote for. He said, because the people like me too much. I don't want to influence their vote. I'm a freaking comedian. Why? If I'm influencing someone's vote, I'm not doing my job. Wow, what a great world. It's too bad it's gone. I'm sick and tired of telling people, this is how you need to think. And if not, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe. No, I'm not. I love women. I happen to believe in God, and I happen to believe in biology. That this was science. These are the same asshats that say you can't argue with climate change, it's science. But I can argue that a man can give birth because that's not science. That's just kindness. Kindness, like opening a border and letting people walk across it. Antifa believes there should be no borders. They also believe in the overthrow of the United States government. You know what that's called? It's called sedition. And you can kill people for that legally. I mean, for real, they kill people for sedition. You try to take over a government in the United States, that carries the death penalty. If you get lucky, you're going to do life without. And there's an organization out there doing this, and politicians in that town are supporting them. Do you see a problem in this? What happens if you're out there? Yeah, they want anarchy. They do. That's one of their tenets. They believe in anarchy. If you're out there protesting the United States of America and your local government comes in to march with you and say, these people are right, you just got a mandate from the government to run off anyone that doesn't agree with you. And if that means hitting somebody with a pole or pepper spraying somebody, there was an arrest made, 3 arrests made, I think it was last night or it was the night before in Portland, which is a change. But one of them was a conservative cat that was just walking through there. They call conservative people who disagree with what's happening there agitators. So you're allowed to protest as long as you agree with the protesters. I am a liberal in the classic sense of the word. I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, right? The open air market of ideas where we can talk and say, this is a problem. And here's why I believe it's a problem. I have yet to meet anybody that can say to me, what Antifa is doing, here's why, and here's why it's right. They'll just call me a Nazi. And I'll tell you something, my friend Q would take exception to you calling me a Nazi. I did 13 years in a prison system where if you want to be protected as a white guy, you put a swastika on your body. I ain't got one. I haven't got one. I would have loved to have had people have my back. That would have been great. But I'm not going to put a symbol of hate on my body. There's nothing in my makeup that makes me a hater. I don't hate people because of the color of their skin. And I don't hate people because of their political beliefs. But these Antifa rioters, I don't believe them. Not for a friggin' second. Especially when we know that George Soros and his kid donated $80 million to these companies. To these organizations. They just want to destabilize our country. And I got news for you. You know what they're trying to do? They're trying to make the normal people look like psychos so that the government has to come in like dad and settle the argument. If you keep pushing things that make no sense, like you're going to force me to say that a man can give birth, eventually we're going to rise up and we're going to start saying things that are populist, right? Trump's a populist president. Bullshit. Do a little research. Do some critical thinking. I don't like the cat. He's not a populist president. When the populist president shows up, and you're going to hear speech like, we're going to kill all of them. We're going to kill all of them. These people that want to riot in our cities, we're going to go in and we're going to shoot them all down. We're going to hunt them down. We're going to kill them. We're going to eliminate their ability to speak. That's what happens when you get a populist. You get a Hitler. And the sad thing is, if you push people long enough and hard enough, they're going to embrace it. They're going to be so happy to hear that someone's going to come in and not bother with all of the people in Congress who happen to worship a Muslim God and don't believe anything that we believe here. I'm sorry, you think Ilhan Omar should be in our country, period, much less elected to something? She's a psychopath. She got here by marrying her brother. That's not fake news, by the way. You can research this. How the hell did we end up here? The answer is we kept our mouth shut. We didn't want to get called a hater. We didn't want to get called a racist. We didn't want people at work telling us that we weren't woke or we weren't this. Keep your mouth shut for another couple of years and watch what happens to America. Everybody in this country ought to be reaching out to their politicians and saying, what the hell is going on in our cities? Forget sending in troops, send in tanks. I'm sorry. These people aren't, in the classical sense of the word, our citizens. If you're trying to overthrow the government, I think that you're no longer a citizen. Off of the coast of South America, we are blasting drug boats out of the water. Why? Because there are countries that have become narco terrorist countries. The governments are corrupt. All of the money that comes in from drugs, and it's all going to our country. And it's the number one cause of death in our country. That's not an invasion. They got to come in and shoot us. If the number one cause of death is poison that's getting sent from South America and Mexico into our country with a lot of help from China, that's an invasion. They're coming in here with poison that is absolutely decimating our society. Something's got to be done. Hillary Clinton came out. This isn't fake news. You can go look at it. She said, we're firing on those boats without due process. She's counting on you being stupid. Put a 2 in the chat if you understand why the people in those boats don't get due process. Due process is a concept that we came up with in the U.S., where when you are arrested on U.S. soil, we didn't want to become a banana republic. We didn't want to lock you up and keep you locked up for 3 weeks without anyone knowing your charges. So we designed things like habeas corpus, which literally means produce the body. We arrest this person, then we show up in court where everyone can see him and go, here's what we're charging him with. And we got to do that within about 72 hours, depending on jurisdiction and whether it's federal or state. But it's due process. We have to go through these processes. What do you think due process is costing us? Every person that comes into this country illegally, we need to give them due process? No, they're an invasion. They're an invasion. Invaders don't get due process. If you jump off a boat and run here with a gun, we don't do due process. We blow those boats out of the water because they don't get due process. They're not U.S. citizens. Oh, but everybody gets due process. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen. If you're here from another country in America and you get caught, you still get due process. Yeah. Like the big MS-13 guy that everybody was losing their mind about that we deported. Absolute scumbag. Wife beater. So low life, high level MS-13 guy. He's now rotting in prison for the rest of his life, where he probably ought to be. But they say there was no due process. Really? How about a little critical thinking? Go back and look. That man spent more time in court than anybody who has ever been deported. They had a deportation order on him before he was picked up. But it's a good narrative. It's a good narrative. And they're going to run with it. Right? Critical thinking got to come back, people. And if you don't start doing critical thinking, then you're screwed. The UK is in trouble too, says Renee B. It's in worse trouble than we are. It's in worse trouble than we are. Absolutely it is. Think about this for a second. We open the borders and we say anybody that wants to come in can come in. This is the land of opportunity. We need workers. You can come on in. What happens if 60% of the country becomes Muslim? Is that a problem? Well, I read the Quran, right? I don't know if you all have. But do you know in the Quran it says that Allah is the ultimate trickster, the ultimate frauder, right? The ultimate deceiver. Does that sound like somebody that is godlike? Because that's how we describe Satan in the Bible. Now, I'm not saying that they're Satan. But I'm saying that what we think doesn't line up in any way. We don't believe that women should have to cover their entire bodies, including their head. We believe that women should have the right to drive or hold office or go to school. But we will scream and yell about how Christians aren't tolerant and we've caused all the problems. And Muslims are mostly peaceful. They're laughing their ass off at us while we're saying that. I'm telling you there. The last book in there says that it's your responsibility to Allah. If you can't convert someone, you kill them. Yeah, I've heard that in Christianity a lot. If you can't turn someone into a Christian, rub them out, right? Get them off the planet. I don't want those people in my country. Does that make me a racist? I mean, you want to come here and live and have a mosque or whatever, knock yourself out. But when that percentage starts to get to 30 or 40%, we're electing people that want Sharia law. That's a friggin' problem. Doesn't make me a racist to say it. But if you keep your mouth shut, you're going to be practicing Sharia law. I promise, it's coming. Go look in Texas, right? Go look at some of the video of Texas where they're talking about this. They have big speakers for call to worship. That's not our country. I'm sorry. Well, Tommy, we're allowed, religious freedom. Yeah. And if you do legal immigration, then you can regulate what percentage comes in and you get a melting pot. You get 10% of these people, 50% of these people. But if at the same time you say, we're also going to get rid of this moral compass that we had that says all men are created equal and endowed by their creator, right? Made in the image of God, all of these things that now go, oh, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. What about the people that don't believe? I'm sorry, screw them. You have to have a yardstick. If you don't believe, then tell me what we're going to use as the yardstick. Because currently anything goes. You want to be a dolphin queen king? You can be. You want to go read to 6-year-olds wearing a G-string? I'm not a bigot. Go in there and read to the kids. You want to shower in a locker room with women? I can't tell you that that's not right for you. Where does that line stop? Honestly, critical thinking, where does that line stop? I'll tell you where it stops. It stops with newspeak. We stop calling them pedophiles and we start calling them minor attracted people. It's not their fault that they want to have sex with kids. I don't give a shit whose fault it is. I'm sorry, I don't. If that makes me a bad person, I'll sign the document. Where do I got to sign it? You want to have sex with a kid? Move into the woods, right? Away from everybody else on earth and go live your life. That's great. If not, then you probably should be locked away for the rest of your life or just taken off the planet. And the arguments you're hearing now, I watched them today. I watched a woman in court go in and say to a judge, he looked at pictures, Your Honor. He didn't touch anybody. This man looked at pictures. If people didn't look at pictures, nobody would be filming those pictures. Nobody would be making child porn if there wasn't a market for child porn. You don't end it by getting all the people that make it. You lock up the people that buy it, right? And you make the penalty so freaking stiff that the people that are thinking about it don't have the balls to do it. Supply and demand. If people don't want what you're selling, you'll stop making it. This is pretty basic free market stuff. Oh, but we don't believe in free markets, right? More than half of the country thinks communism is a better method than capitalism, in spite of the fact that it's never worked once, 1,000 times. Look it up, 1,000 times. Now, don't say socialism because it's not the same thing. However, the guy that came up with the concept said socialism is the first step to communism because no one's going to accept the communism thing. So you start with the socialism thing and you talk about how many people you can help, right? Sounds friggin' fantastic, doesn't it? The United States of America donates more money to charities and to other people than any other country in the world by a damn stretch. Now, the cynic will say, well, that's to ditch taxes. I think it's because we're incredibly kind-hearted people. And we do try to look out for others. Megadeth's Holy War or Black Sabbath's War Pigs, absolutely great. I hate the world right now. Sorry, but morality has died. I'm not mad at you. Morality has died, right? We don't say bestiality anymore because that hurts the feelings of the people that want to have sex with your cat or your dog. They're zoophiles. Zoophiles. Doesn't that sound nicer? Huh? They're freaks. That's what they are. A dog can't consent to having sex with a human being. Somebody that does that should have their junk removed, right? And not to be called the other gender. I just mean cut that rascal off. These are sick people. And when you start saying it's not right, it's not right to pick on people because you were born wanting to have sex with a woman. How come that's not a problem? Maybe because it's friggin' normal, right? Maybe because that's how we procreate. Maybe since the dawn of man, that was accepted. If the world can't see what's happening, then honest to God, critical thinking is dead. Do you remember being 13? Your body doesn't develop as fast as your friends, and you start thinking you're a freak. You start thinking something's wrong with you. What we didn't have was an echo chamber going, well, that's obviously because you're a woman. And that's the world we're in now. And it's become popular. And here's my humble opinion. We're getting played. We're getting played. They're going to let 1% of the population piss off the rest of us until we attack them. And then they're going to come in and start yelling about civil war. And they're going to clamp down. And they're going to take more rights. But how long do you think 99% of the population is just going to go, oh, okay, to 1%? Because I did time, right? I did time. It's an odd little microcosm. But watch what happens when 5 or 6 guys start pushing back against the majority. The majority will stomp them out like a brush fire. The difference is there's no one shaming them inside. There's no one in there saying, well, you're just a hater. You're a piece of crap. You're a bigot, right? You're uneducated. They will tell us that the more educated you are, the more likely you are to accept somebody that says a man can give birth. Put a 2 in the chat if you think that sounds stupid. Because I promise you, an educated person doesn't believe a man can give birth. And I'm not dumb. I know that they're saying it's a woman pretending to be a man that can go and give birth. I'm not calling that a man giving birth. Why? Because once you get me to say something that I know is patently absurd because you pressured me into it, then you can get me to do anything. And I sat with my mouth shut while all of this BS was going on. People would come in the chat and say things that offended the dog shit out of me, things that didn't make any sense whatsoever. And I let it go. I don't want to lose views. I don't want the algorithm to bury me. I don't give a crap what the algorithm does ever again. I don't. And I don't care who I offend. Just because I offend you doesn't mean you're right. In fact, I'm really sorry to say this, but I am right. We're destroying our country. We're destroying our children. There is a war against masculinity, right? If a kid starts acting like a man when he's in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and by that I mean he shoves a couple of kids, he's rambunctious, you can't calm him down. We used to call that manhood. Now we dope him. And the kid sits in the back of the classroom like this, right? Because he's just so much easier to deal with this way, right? Parents want him doped, everybody wants him doped. And now what we have is an army of kids living in mom's basement and playing video games, right? Look at the people that hate me. You realize none of them work? The haters, none of them work. They're all living on government assistance and making freaking videos about how people like me are scumbags and grifters. We have accepted mediocrity. Our greatest resource in America or anywhere else are the men and women of that country. And now we have 1% of the population literally terrorizing the rest of us. Terrorizing us. We have parents that have to hear there's a guy that's going to be showering in your daughter's locker room in school because he identifies as a woman. I would kill people. I'm so glad my kids are grown. I would lose my freaking mind. I would go down there and do something that would have ended up on the news. And it's going to happen again and again. You can't keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And at the same time, telling people that they're the problem. They're going to push back. And when they do, they're the populist president that runs, they're going to elect. And we're going to get a Hitler. You think Trump is Hitler? Then you didn't study much about the German Socialist Party. In fact, you probably didn't read anything about it. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be a dick. But do you know how many people have reached out to me to tell me I'm an asshole? And I said to them, articulate your point. It's pretty damn easy to say this, right? Yeah, this is a great point. This is a great point. I got to blow it up here, but this is a great point. Well, man, if 90% of our population only relies on an intelligence that is artificial and believes it's smarter than themselves or their parents, they're already gullible as hell and will believe anything. And the problem with that is we believe that AI just goes out and finds the information, and that's not what happens. They go out and find the information that the designers want you to see. Now, if you get good at AI, you can get through that. Send me an email and explain your position. Mine's really simple. I believe we are all created in the image of God. right? And by the way, science is proving intelligent design. If you don't realize this, then you should probably do a little bit more research. But they are showing that the odds that all of this wasn't designed, because if any of it was out of whack in any way, mathematical equations keep coming back through everything. This is why the intelligentsia believe we're in a computer program, because the other option is believing that a creator created us, right? A creator created us. I am also challenging anybody to find me societies that don't use some kind of a power greater than themselves to use it as a yardstick that have been successful. And you're not going to find one. Because once you take away the yardstick that says you can't do this because it is God's law. If you don't want to call it that, you can just say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? This is it. This is how you're born. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator. Oh, you can't say that. And we're going to remove it. You watch. We're going to remove it. Because what we say now is, the people that reach out to me, they'll say, hey, it's not that I don't like you or I disagree or whatever, but I just believe everybody should be able to decide what's right for them. Holy mackerel. Does that sound like a good idea? The Ted Bundys of the world deciding what's good for them, right? Child molesters deciding what's good for them. Bank robbers, scumbags like me, deciding that, you know what? My morality says I can go rob your house. I'll pull the Rolex off your wrist and the ring off of your wife's hand because it works for me. Works for me. I thought humans were the pinnacle. I'd give up. If I thought humans were the pinnacle, I'd give up. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Tommy Bird makes a really good point. And this, folks, is what we call critical thinking. You don't have to agree with Tommy Bird, but if you don't understand this point, macroevolution is a total fairy tale. But if you want to believe it, go ahead and let a monkey be made out of you, or you made out of a monkey, or a microbacteria from rocks and water. Here's why I think this is an important point. Thank you, ex-scumbag. Evolution is a process where things that happen in an environment, great example they use when you take these kind of classes 101 in college, they'll say giraffes' necks grew longer so that they could get to leaves that were higher in the tree. This was evolution that enabled them to do what they're doing, yada, yada. Okay, we crossed the Bering land bridge, right? Why do Caucasians not have hair all over them? Why aren't we covered in hair? We shouldn't have lost our hair. We were living in the coldest part of the world and literally traveling through it. You know, generations were considerably shorter. People didn't live as long. Why did we lose all of our hair? And where's the missing link? I mean, we all took that course. Look at the jaw going from Neanderthal through Homo erectus up to Homo sapien. Where's that missing link they always talked about? There was a period of time where somebody faked something called Piltdown Man. You might want to look into that. I remember in 6th grade, they came in and said, here's the missing link. There is no God. Okay. But it was a hoax. It was a hoax. Here's another thing that's interesting to think about. So we've been evolving for however long they say this evolution happened. Then why is it that in the last 100 years, we've been able to put a man on the moon, invent computers, invent the ability to talk on landlines, jam to these things, which can literally be a computer in your hand anytime you need one, to text or do whatever. I sent money to somebody today in the United States, and it took literally a half a second. While I was talking to the person, the money was already in their account. All of this we've pulled off since what, 1930 something, 37? Boy, that evolution thing's in high gear, isn't it? We are finding ourselves in a place where computers can do things that men never could. And you know what they're finding? That we were designed. Not just us, all of this. The universe, every bit of it. There is intelligent design throughout all of it. Any small variations, and this just doesn't work. They find math everywhere. Great question. Was math invented or discovered? Well, if we invented it, how do we find it everywhere? If you go to the pyramids, right, and you take, I can't remember, length times width or whatever, and it gives you the speed of light, you think that's a freaking coincidence? Well, if you do, you can also figure out that if you go from the inside up, it's a Fibonacci sequence, which just keeps coming back in everything in nature. Here's my humble opinion, and it's just my humble opinion. You know what the pyramids were there for? In high school, what did they tell us? That was there so that you could bury pharaohs in it. But only one of them had a pharaoh. All of the other ones didn't. I figure he's the richest dude in town and says, I'd like to be buried in that. He runs the place. He says, that's going to be my tomb. they would survive anything. They would survive cataclysms, floods. I mean, those are some big ass rocks in that thing. It's not going anywhere. It was left there to show us sacred geometry. Other geometry from in there that you multiply gives you the distance to the sun. Keeping in mind, right? Keep in mind that we didn't understand any of this crap for how many years after that? Nothing we've been told has ever been the truth. I promise you. The stuff that they taught us in school was all BS. It really was. I remember studying Pearl Harbor and being so angry. For real. You know, they snuck in the middle of the night like dirty SOBs and killed all of those people, half of them still in bed, and our government knew that attack was coming. Does that make you feel good? Doesn't make me feel good. MK Ultra, no longer debatable. We took people and brainwashed them to see if we could turn them into assassins. We did experiments on people with LSD. Prisoners in the feds could get time off their sentence if they agreed to have massive amounts of LSD injected into their body. We've done some really sick stuff in our life. And our life as a country. Stuff that we should be brutally ashamed of. But we're going to look back on what we're doing to kids right now, and it's going to make all of the rest of it look like Christmas Day. Seriously, you want to reach out to me and have a conversation where you can explain to me how it's possible that human beings believe that it's all right for a 6 or an 8-year-old to tell you that they're not a man or a woman? Based on what? They don't have the brain pan to figure that out, right? I use this illustration all the time, but I wanted to be Batman when I was 6. This is not something that we should be doing. And you know what? If you don't believe in it, you're a scumbag. You're a bad human being. It's kind of how it flies, isn't it? Tommy, do you think it's possible October 7th, 2023 was the Israeli version of Pearl Harbor and they allowed it? I think if it was coming, they might have allowed it. The one reason that that's a little harder for me to wrap my brain around is because the Jews seem to have a real appreciation for their people in a way that we don't. Like Americans say, we don't negotiate for hostages. It's a policy. We'll never do it. I understand why. But I remember when I was a kid, they did a exchange and it was like 1,000 prisoners to get a pilot. And when they released 1,000 people to get one, the press ate him alive and said, how could you do that? And he said, because one of us is easily worth 1,000 of them. Like, they have a love for their people. I would be surprised if they allowed them knowingly to come in there and do that. They also could have just blasted them the second that they got in there and still made the point. I think that it was a beautifully set up terrorist attack. And you know what's amazing? Hundreds of thousands of people march in the United States for the people that went in there underneath those canopies with automatic weapons and enough methamphetamine in them to kill anybody. I was going to pick on a couple of rock stars, right? To kill a Belushi. No, I mean, they hop these people up. Some of the ones that they captured took days for them to come down off of that crap so that they could talk to them. Echo chambers are a dangerous thing. The reason that, every time I bring up the Israeli situation, people go, they've been fighting my entire life, and they always will. Do you know why? Because if you find 2-year-olds, they can say to you, the Jews suck, or the Arabs suck, or the Palestinians suck. That hatred literally is taught at birth. It isn't inherent, but they teach that hatred instantly. And you know what? I'm sorry. If you take it from a military standpoint, if you were trying to protect your citizenry, what are you going to do? You keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, or do you say, we're going to wipe them off the planet? It's not healthy. It's not. But it's happened again and again. We're living in really rugged times, and it's all happening at once, right? It's all happening at once. China's about to invade Taiwan. All of these things are about to happen. And by the way, I'm going to be doing a show on Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a bigger scumbag than I am times 10. For those of you that don't do a lot of critical thinking or a lot of research, this guy sold our country to another country. They've got the papers. $200,000 deposits from his brother to him this exact same day that the Chinese government sent $200,000 to his brother. This is a guy in office getting paid off by a country that most of us assume to be an enemy. He ain't going to do any time. He ain't going to get convicted of any of this. They can do whatever they want at the top. And the pressure is way too hard to go after people like this. Nancy Pelosi's filthy, although the stories you're hearing on her aren't true. I had a lot of people send me stories on Nancy Pelosi and how she's about to be indicted. And, this happened and there was a hearing. It's all AI. There's no truth to any of that stuff. Joe Walsh is still alive. He's not dead. If you see something, it doesn't mean it's true. And if you don't start doing critical thinking, if you don't start saying, well, maybe I'll chase down the source of this, then you're just going to keep getting BS'd. And the fear isn't that you're going to start believing the other side or doing any of that. The fear is you're going to get so pissed off, you're going to become part of a mass of people that will welcome genocide of the people destroying the country. And if you don't think it can happen, it's happened again and again and again and again. Keep screwing up something that you believe in, and people will go, I don't care if you kill all of them. I don't care if you kill all of them. I don't want to see all of the people in Antifa rubbed off the planet because I don't think most of them are in Antifa. I think they're getting paid. You can go back and look up. There were newspaper articles writing ads saying, we want protesters. We'll pay you $15 an hour. This was during the Black Lives Matter thing, right? It's horrific, but it's where we're at. Misinformation is key. I like to call Nancy Pelosi the crypt keeper. Who is the master puppeteer? Well, that's a damn good question, isn't it? There are people that believe that it's the Mossad. There's a lot of people that are believing that. But that's rising to a new level of anti-Semitism that we haven't seen since 1939. There are so many people on the planet now who hate the Jews. And I'll tell you what, if I was a Jew, I'd be terrified. I'd be terrified. There are more Jews in the United States than there are in Israel. It's got to be a frightening place to live. I don't blame much for what they do to try to keep themselves alive. Everybody over there wants them dead. They're all trying to build nuclear weapons. Soros is definitely deep in this, but he's not the only one. And here's the problem. The problem is that conservatives and people on the other side of the aisle never got into media. They never got into Hollywood. They never got into all of these things that have been a bastion of the left for a long time. Now, TikTok is going to get taken over. If it's going to remain a U.S. company, someone's going to take it over. Who's that going to be? Larry Ellison? We're going to end up with somebody taking that over who's right wing. Then what? I don't want them manipulating the people to believe conservatives either. I don't want everyone turning into me. I spent a long time reading to try to come up with the things that I believe, right? Milton Friedman. I studied the works of Milton Friedman. I think the guy's a genius. A lot of people disagree with me, but I know why I believe what I believe. I know why I believe that capitalism works and socialism doesn't. Socialism, first of all, capitalist socialism, the people that go, Norway, those aren't socialist societies. Do a little reading. I'm not trying to be a dickhead, but we live in a country these days that gets their news from TikTok. Not making this up. These are statistics. And if you happen to be under 30, there's a 60% chance that all of your news that you get from TikTok. That's run by who? ByteDance. ByteDance is absolutely run, controlled, everything else by the Communist Party of China. If you don't see that as a problem, I mean, we are effed. And I did a show about TikTok 2 years ago talking about this. It's not about the videos. Who cares about the Tide Pod Challenge? The problem is if you start with the Tide Pod Challenge and you start with TikTok and dance videos, the next thing you know, you're getting your news there. And you believe that what's happening in Portland is because our president is a fascist. Even if you hate Trump, what would you do if you were in the presidency? Just let the cities burn to the ground? Let the citizens of those cities be terrified to go outside? You got to do something. You got to do something. TikTok seems like a waste of time. I'll tell you something else. Read their agreement. You're giving them the permission to look at every single email and every single text message, to look through everything that you have. Got some videos that you and your girl did that might be a little dirty? Well, they're going to see those too. And if you don't, maybe film some. But don't let TikTok get a hold of them, for the love of God. It's terrifying to me, man. Terrifying to me. We're going to find ourselves in the very near future, all of us, having to make a decision on what side of this you come down on. Because if you keep your mouth shut, if you don't start spreading this stuff, share every video you agree with. For real. You agree with a video, share it. And share it to 10 people. Because if you don't, the algorithm isn't going to pick it up. If I put up here on the bottom, Trump sucks, I got a really good chance of getting a hell of a lot of action from the algorithm. They want negative. They don't want positive. It's got to change. They're about to elect a communist mayor in New York. I know. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing. We're going to hell in a handbasket, and they're ushering it in with big grins on their face. Because every 7 to 10 years, a new group of douchebags go through college, who have professors that tell them that, the workers unite. It's never worked. You know why? Because you still have to have a leader. And that leader, if he's going to keep power, is going to shut you the hell down. You're not going to be able to protest. You're not going to be able to do anything. I agree with you. I think that Biden couldn't find his way out of his closet when he was president. I'm not making that up. The Secret Service said they would have to go in the closet and help him find his way out in the morning. What we did to him was evil, right? They should never have allowed that to happen to the man. Right? I'm not a fan of his, but he had no dignity whatsoever at the end. It was just absolutely awful. Well, the ring that Barack Obama wears on his hand, I'm not gonna get demonetized over this one. Look up his wedding ring and see what it says on it. You also might want to look up a clip of the film. He was being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos, and George Stephanopoulos was talking about Barack Obama running against a Mormon. And do you think that this would be an issue? And he said, I don't think so. He said, when I was running, nobody made an issue of my Muslim faith. And the interviewer, who's a left-wing piece of shit, said, oh, you mean your Christian faith? He said, yeah, my Christian faith is what I meant. If I'm dating someone, right? Let's say that we'll use my ex, right? If I'm hanging out with Reese and I say to somebody, yeah, my girlfriend Karen, I mean Reese, pretty good chance I'm banging someone named Karen. You don't mess up your wife's name. You don't mess up your religion. What was he? I don't know. I heard him in an interview. I read his books. He said the most beautiful sound in the world is the call to worship for for the Muslim faith. That's the most beautiful sound in the world to him. I don't think a Christian would find that the most beautiful sound in the world. But running as a Muslim in our country would be hard. Not because we're haters, but because their book says you got to kill infidels. Their book calls their God the greatest deceiver. Christianity calls Satan the greatest deceiver. Maybe kick that around a little, right? Maybe kick that around. My opinions are my opinions. But I'm telling you what we're doing to kids. I don't care what God you pray to. What we're doing to kids is unconscionable. For real. And we'll pay for it as a society and maybe when you leave this earth. Everybody knows my criminal history. I don't know anything that you people have done wrong in your life. But if I were you, I would find somebody that's going to advocate for all of those things that you did wrong. Mine are paid for, straight up. And I'm not talking about prison. Jesus is Lord, and I'll leave you with that thought. And this right here, folks, that is a white cat in a basket. I am Tommy Scoville, and I will see you on the next one. I'm not sorry for any of this, by the way. I'm not. If you don't speak up, then you're going to live in the world that you deserve. You're going to take a stand, or you're going to live in the world that you deserve to live in. Capiche? See you on the next one. God bless.